You're listening to a special 8-part mini-series on leading change in public education, using John Kotter's 8-step framework as a guide for our current moment in schools. This is episode 1 of an 8-part series. Today we're starting with step 1, creating a sense of urgency. And we'll stay grounded in 2 concrete examples throughout the series: strengthening MTSS and redesigning student support and discipline so staff can sustain the work over time. In this episode, you'll hear how urgency fits into the larger 8-step arc, why it matters in a school system under pressure, and what it looks like when leaders are trying to respond to heightened student needs without asking already stretched adults to carry even more alone.
Welcome to Little Bits of TLC, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of education. Join our host, Heather Volchko, as this season we're exploring what it takes to lead meaningful change in public education through the lens of John Kotter's 8-step framework for change. Across the next 8 episodes, we'll connect each step of Kotter's model to the realities schools face every day. From building urgency and developing a shared vision to sustaining changes over time, we'll explore practical strategies for creating systems that support both students and educators. Drawing from real-world experiences across school systems, each episode is designed not only to introduce new ideas, but to help turn them into actions through discussion guides your teams can use throughout your very own local change processes. If you're trying to lead change in a system that often feels both overloaded and under-supported, you're in the right place. Let's explore how we can create meaningful, lasting change in public education together. This is Little Bits of TLC.
Welcome to this summer mini-series on Kotter's 8 steps for leading change in public education. This series is designed for educational leaders at every level, and it is meant to be heard in order. Each episode builds on the one before it because change work in schools is rarely one move, one meeting, or one memo. It is a sequence, it is a pattern. And when that pattern is weak in one place, the whole effort starts to unravel. In this first episode, the focus is urgency, not panic, not pressure for the sake of pressure, not one more dramatic appeal for everyone to work harder. Urgency in Kotter's framework is about helping people see why action matters now and why the future can be meaningfully different from the present. Kotter describes this step as inspiring people to act with passion and purpose around a compelling and clear future. That distinction matters in schools because public education already has plenty of urgency language. Every district has deadlines. Every school has dashboards. Every principal has a list of concerns that could fill an hour before students even arrive. And in this current moment, those concerns often converge: heightened student needs, outcomes pressure, staff strain, and broad fatigue with initiatives that promise coherence but often add complexity. But real change does not begin simply because people feel overloaded. In many cases, overload is exactly what keeps change from taking root. So in this episode, the central question is this: how does a leader create real urgency in a school system where many adults already feel maxed out? And more specifically, how do we create urgency from a staff sustainability and burnout perspective while still keeping our eyes on heightened student needs and outcomes pressure? That is the heart of this episode. Because the current moment in public education is not defined by one challenge. It is defined by convergence. Student academic needs are complex. Student behavior and regulation needs are complex. Families are asking hard questions. Systems are expected to show results quickly. And many of the adults asked to carry this load are doing so while tired, stretched, and unsure whether the next initiative will actually change anything. That is why urgency has to be built carefully. If leaders confuse urgency with alarm, they raise anxiety but do not build movement. If they confuse urgency with compliance, they may get short-term task completion, but they do not create commitment. And if they ignore urgency altogether, improvement efforts drift into delay. So let me start with the core idea. Kotter's model begins with urgency because people rarely commit meaningful effort to change unless they understand why staying the same is no longer acceptable. In Kotter's description of the process, urgency builds momentum and helps people pursue a compelling vision together. In public education, that means a leader has to help staff answer 4 questions. Why this? Why now? Why together? And why is this worth my energy when my energy already feels limited? That last question is the one many leaders miss. Too often, urgency is framed only around student outcomes. Scores are down, attendance is inconsistent, referral patterns are concerning, intervention systems are fragmented. Those are all real concerns. But when urgency is framed only as another set of deficits to solve, staff members often hear one message underneath the message: you are not doing enough. And for burned out teams, that interpretation can shut the door before the work even begins. A stronger approach is to frame urgency around the cost of continuing to ask adults to operate inside systems that are not working well enough for students or for staff. That is a different kind of message. It says this is not about squeezing more effort out of already committed people. It is about redesigning conditions so good people are not forced to carry ineffective systems on their backs. That is where urgency becomes humane. And when urgency is humane, it becomes more believable. Consider a district that says it wants to strengthen MTSS. On paper, that can sound like just another initiative. Staff may hear the acronym and immediately think of more meetings, more documentation, more spreadsheets, and more demands on teams that already feel buried. Now imagine the same district frames the issue differently. The leader says, right now, too many teachers are trying to solve intensive student needs alone. Teams are spending time on referrals that come too late, interventions that are not coordinated, and meetings that do not lead to clear next steps. Students are not getting timely support, and staff are burning out trying to compensate for a system that is too fragmented. We cannot keep asking people to work this way. That lands differently. The problem is no longer just implementation weakness. The problem is a pattern that drains adults and underserves students at the same time. That kind of urgency can mobilize action because it honors reality without humiliating people. And that matters deeply in schools. Education professionals are often deeply mission driven. Many will absorb unreasonable strain for a long time because they care about students and communities. But systems that depend on personal sacrifice as their main operating strategy do not become stronger over time. They become brittle. So if episode 1 is about urgency, the message is not that schools need more pressure. The message is that schools need a more honest case for change. Here is one way to define urgency for this moment. Urgency is a shared understanding that the current way of working is producing too much strain, too much inconsistency, or too little impact to be acceptable going forward, and that there is a credible path towards something better. Notice 2 parts of that description. First, something about the present state is not acceptable. Second, there is a credible path forward. Both parts matter. If leaders emphasize only what is broken, staff hear despair. If leaders emphasize only a hopeful future without naming the present strain, staff hear fantasy. Real urgency lives in the tension between those 2 truths. This is why the opening step in Kotter's model sets the tone for the rest of the sequence. When urgency is grounded and clear, it becomes easier to build a guiding coalition in episode 2 because people understand what they are being invited to help lead. It becomes easier to form a strategic vision in episode 3 because the vision solves a problem people can already name. And it becomes easier later to generate short-term wins and sustain acceleration because the work has a purpose people actually feel. So how does a leader create urgency well in public education? There are a few practical moves that matter. That the first is to name the strain without dramatizing it. Leaders do not need theatrical language. They need accurate language. For example, our staff are working hard, but our support system for students with intensive needs is too reactive. Or our current process asks classroom teachers, intervention staff, and administrators to navigate too many disconnected steps before support reaches students. Or we are relying on individual heroics when we need reliable systems. That kind of language does 2 things. It validates effort and identifies design flaws. It keeps the focus on the work, not on blaming people. The second move is to connect staff strain to student outcomes. This is essential. A burnout-centered urgency message should never suggest that adult comfort matters more than student growth. The point is that staff efficacy and student outcomes are linked. When teams are overloaded, intervention quality becomes inconsistent. When meetings are unclear, response time slows. When support systems are fragmented, classroom conditions erode. When support staff spend energy navigating broken processes, less energy remains for instruction, coaching, problem solving, or direct student support. In other words, staff sustainability is not separate from student outcomes. It is part of the conditions that make outcomes possible. The third move is to show that the issue is structural, not simply individual. This is where many change efforts lose credibility. If the urgency message sounds like this, everyone needs to be more committed, more resilient, and more responsive. People often hear a disguised accusation. But if the message sounds like this, we need clearer tier 2 pathways, faster problem-solving routines, better decision rules, and more usable data processes. The work becomes actionable. That distinction is vital. Burnout is not solved by slogans. It is reduced when structures improve. The fourth move is to present a plausible improvement path. Kotter does not position urgency as fear by itself. The point is to create movement toward a clear and bold opportunity. So a school leader should not stop at, we cannot keep doing this. The leader also needs to say something like, over the next year, we are going to tighten our MTSS routines, simplify referral pathways, strengthen Tier 2 and Tier 3 coordination, and make sure teams leave meetings with clear action steps instead of more ambiguity. Now, the urgency has direction. The fifth move is to repeat the message across settings. Urgency is not built in one kickoff. It is reinforced in faculty meetings, cabinet conversations, principal coaching, grade level discussions, and board updates. People need to hear a coherent through line often enough that they begin to say it themselves. That matters because episode 1 is not just about introducing a concern, it is about establishing a shared interpretation of reality. And shared interpretation is the beginning of coordinated action. We'll dig into that with a few concrete school stories right after this short break.
You know that feeling when you've tried everything you can think of and the student is still struggling? Everyone's putting in the effort, but it feels like nobody has the time, resources, or roadmap to figure out what comes next. That's where Threshold Learning nonprofit comes in. We partner with schools to help tackle the challenges that don't have simple answers. Whether it's supporting a student with complex needs, completing functional behavior assessments, strengthening intervention programs, or helping teams get on the same page, our focus is always the same: practical solutions that work in real schools with real people. We're not here to hand you a binder and disappear. We're here to help schools build the confidence, knowledge, and systems to keep supporting students long after we're gone. If you're listening and thinking, my school could really use something like that, let your administrator know about Threshold Learning nonprofit or visit our website to learn more, because every student deserves a chance to thrive in schools and beyond. Looking for something that actually fits your life? TLC University is here for that. Each week, we spotlight something different: a webinar with real-world insights, a hangout-style interview, and a hands-on workshop or a Q&A where we answer your questions. It's flexible, it's self-paced, and most come with CEUs. So whether you're looking to grow, reflect, or just listen in, there's something here for you. And it's all in one place: university.thresholdlearning.org. That's where you'll find show notes, professional blogs, a full catalog of ACE-accredited courses, and downloadable resources. It all just keeps growing. So whether you're walking the dog, commuting, or taking a breather between the daily grind, TLC University meets you where you are. Head to university.thresholdlearning.org and check out what's new this week. See you then.
Let's get back to how this plays out on the ground and what it means for your MTSS and student support work this year. Imagine a mid-sized district entering the summer before a new school year. Over the previous year, office discipline referrals rose in several buildings. Teachers reported feeling unsupported with high-need students. Building leaders noticed that teams were spending significant time discussing student concerns without a clear process for matching needs to interventions. FBAs and BIPs, when completed, varied in quality and timeliness. Some students received layered supports. Others moved through inconsistent reactions depending on the building, the administrator, or the crisis of the day. In response, district leadership decides to strengthen MTSS and redesign Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. Here's the weak urgency message: we need to improve our data and intervention systems because our outcomes are not where they need to be. True, maybe, but forgettable. Here's the stronger urgency message: our current support structure is asking too many people to improvise under pressure. Teachers are carrying needs that should be team supported. Building leaders are spending time in repeated crisis response. Students with more intensive needs are getting uneven access to timely supports. We have strong people in the system, but we do not yet have a strong enough system around them. This year, we need to change that. And that message is stronger because it explains the cost of the current state in human and organizational terms. It also signals respect. Notice what it does not say. It does not say staff are failing, and it does not say students are the problem, and it does not say one department is to blame. It names reality, and then it invites collective action. That is the kind of urgency that can open the door to real change. There is another nuance here that matters in schools. Educational leaders often inherit communities that are fatigued by churn, new literacy framework, new data platform, new attendance push, new discipline form, new meeting protocol, new consultant, new acronym. In those environments, staff may not resist change because they are closed-minded. They may resist because the organization has trained them to expect that every new initiative will add work without removing anything. That means urgency must also include subtraction. If you want people to believe change is serious, they need signs that the organization is willing to stop doing some things, streamline some things, and protect time for the work that matters most. This becomes especially important when your change effort involves MTSS or behavior support redesign. These efforts often struggle not because the ideas are poor, but because the implementation sits on top of every other demand. Meetings get added, forms get added, data requests get added. The formal structure expands, but the actual capacity does not. So part of creating urgency is telling the truth about overload and making a case that the change itself is meant to reduce friction over time. That is different from saying, please endure more now and maybe things will get better later. Now, let us talk about what leaders commonly get wrong in this step. One common mistake is mistaking urgency for fear. Fear can create immediate attention, but it rarely produces durable trust. In schools, fear-based urgency may look like constant references to public rankings, dramatic comparisons, or messaging that implies catastrophe unless everyone speeds up immediately. That kind of atmosphere can create compliance. It can also create silence, self-protection, and shallow implementation. Another mistake is treating urgency as an opening speech instead of an ongoing discipline. A leader may launch the year with a strong message, then fail to revisit it when teams get pulled back into routine habits. Urgency fades unless it is sustained through consistent communication, decision-making, and visible follow-through. A third mistake is failing to distinguish urgency from impatience. Impatience says, why is this not fixed yet? Urgency says, this matters too much to delay, so we are going to move in a focused and disciplined way. Those are not the same thing. In fact, impatient leaders often create more chaos because they push for visible motion before the organization has built enough clarity. Another mistake is using data without meaning. Data can support urgency, but numbers alone rarely move people. A referral trend, staffing pattern, or intervention backlog becomes useful when leaders explain what it means for daily work and for students' access to timely support. And a final mistake is ignoring hope. People do not step into hard change because the present is painful alone. They move when they can picture a more workable future. This is especially important when staff have been carrying a lot. Burned out teams do not need empty optimism, but they do need evidence that change could reduce friction, improve coherence, and make their effort count for more. So what does this mean for a leader preparing for the school year right now? It means urgency work should begin before the formal rollout of any initiative, before you ask people to join design teams, before you release a new MTSS flowchart, before you retrain everyone on FBAs, BIPs, intervention pathways, or meeting norms. You first need a clear, repeatable case for why this work matters now. Here are a few questions a leader can use to test whether that case is strong enough. Can staff explain the problem in similar language across roles? Can they describe why the current pattern is unsustainable for both adults and students? Can they see how the proposed work might improve the daily experience of teaching, supporting, and leading? Can they tell the difference between this change and the last few initiatives that faded? And do they hear the message as an invitation to build something better rather than another critique of their effort? Those are useful diagnostic questions. If the answer is no to most of them, urgency is probably not strong enough yet. There is one more idea here that will matter across the whole series. In schools, urgency is often strongest when leaders make the invisible visible. They show how many support conversations happen with no follow-up path. They show how many staff hours are spent managing preventable confusion. They show how often the same students circulate through reactive responses instead of coordinated support. They show how much expertise exists in the system, but how inconsistently it is organized. When leaders do that well, the need for change becomes easier to feel and easier to discuss. That creates the conditions for the next step in Kotter's process: building a guiding coalition. Kotter describes that second step as creating a coalition of committed people from the network's own ranks to guide, coordinate, and communicate the work. And that sequence matters. You do not build the right coalition by starting with names on an org chart alone. You build it by first making the need for change legible enough that the right people want to help carry it. That is where urgency leads. Before we close, here are 3 practical actions leaders can take this week. Action 1. Write a 1-paragraph urgency statement. Keep it plain. Name the current strain, connect it to student support and staff efficacy, and point toward a better operating model. Action 2. Test the message with a few trusted people across roles. Ask them where it feels true, where it feels vague, and whether it sounds like one more initiative or a genuine effort to improve how the work gets done. Action 3, identify one visible sign that this change effort will remove friction, not just add expectations. That could be a simpler referral step, a reduced meeting burden, a cleaner decision rule, or a commitment to retire an outdated process. Those small signs matter because people judge change not only by what leaders say, but by what leaders stop, simplify, and protect. So here's the core takeaway from episode 1. Urgency in public education should not be built through panic or blame. It should be built through honest recognition that the current way of working is putting too much strain on adults, producing too much inconsistency for students, and limiting the impact schools are trying to achieve. Kotter's first step asks leaders to create momentum around a clear and compelling future. And in schools, that future has to feel both ambitious and workable. In the next episode, the focus will be the guiding coalition. Once people understand why the work matters, the next question becomes who needs to help lead it so the effort has credibility, reach, and staying power.
This episode is one part of an 8-step journey through John Kotter's change framework, applied to the real conditions of public education today. We've started with step 1, creating a sense of urgency, setting the stage for every other move we'll make in this series. If you'd like to go deeper, you can find show notes, transcripts, and discussion guides for each episode at university.thresholdlearning.org. They're designed so you can use this series with leadership teams, MTSS teams, and building level groups as you plan for the coming school year. And if you want to go back to the source, John Kotter's most recent book, Change, How Organizations Achieve Hard-to-Imagine Results in Uncertain and Volatile Times, offers the core ideas this mini-series is built on. What you're hearing here is one way those ideas show up in public schools right now. In the next episode, we'll turn to step 2, building a guiding coalition, and look at who needs to be at the center of this work so it has credibility, reach, and staying power.
Hey, before you jump back into your busy life, consider following @Threshold Learning TLC on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and Little Bits of TLC on TikTok, YouTube, and Threads. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider sharing the podcast with a colleague. Personal recommendations are one of the best ways to help other educators discover the show. You can find Little Bits of TLC on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Just be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite platform so you never miss a new episode. You can also email us at podcast@thresholdlearning.org. We always enjoy connecting with fellow educators and champions for educational justice. For everything else, including our programs, resources, and professional learning opportunities, visit university.thresholdlearning.org. That's university.thresholdlearning.org. See you there.